Ajanigo had started dating her boyfriend Desmond when she was just 14, and Desmond was 18. Her mother had warned her to end whatever relationship they had, but Ajanigo didn't listen. Her father didn't only scold her, he went as far as withdrawing her from school. Despite this, Ajanigo continued to sneak out to see Desmond whenever no one was home. Desmond was living with his uncle, who stayed very close to Ajanigo's home. Eventually, her father, along with her 2 brothers and some police officers, went to Desmond's uncle's house and had him arrested. Desmond was later released on bail, but his uncle forbade him from returning to his house. He had to return to his parents' home in another state. A few months after Desmond left, Ajanigo discovered she was pregnant at just 15. When her father found out, he chased her out of the house, telling her never to return. The only means of communication back then was through writing letters, which took weeks or even months to deliver. Her mother secretly passed a few of Ajanigo's belongings to her through the window, but when Ajanigo begged her mother to let her stay, her mother only threw more things at her, telling her to leave. "You know you have no other family, and yet you went and opened your legs for that riffraff," her mother thundered. "Mother, please forgive me, it was a mistake," Ajanigo pleaded on her knees. Her mother picked up a pestle and threatened to throw it at her. Terrified, Ajanigo got up and ran out of the compound as quickly as possible. Neighbors gathered, begging her parents to let her stay, but they turned a deaf ear. After a few hours of wandering, Ajanigo picked up her scattered clothes, tied them together in one of her wrappers, and carried them on her head while tears streamed down her cheeks. As soon as she stepped out of the compound, she heard someone call her name from afar. It was one of her neighbors, Auntie Agnes. "Ajanigo," Auntie Agnes called. "Yes, Ma," Ajanigo answered, her head bowed. Auntie Agnes quickly pressed something into Ajanigo's palm and hurried back inside. Ajanigo opened her palm to find some money. She whispered a prayer of gratitude and left, unsure of where she was going. After a long, tiring walk, she remembered Desmond's uncle. She went straight to his house and knocked on the door. "Ajanigo," the uncle called out, surprised. "Why do you look like this? Are you okay?" he asked, concerned. "Sir, it's a long story," she replied. Come in," he insisted, motioning her inside. "Please, sit and make yourself comfortable." "What is it? Is everything okay with you?" "No, sir. Sir, please, do you know where your nephew Desmond is?" Ajanigo asked. "Is something wrong?" the uncle questioned. I, Ajanigo stuttered. "Go on," he urged. "I'm pregnant, sir, for him. My parents have chased me out," she managed to say. "What?" the uncle exclaimed. "You children of nowadays. As young as you are, you're already pregnant for someone, and you're not even sure if he will marry you." "It was a mistake," Ajanigo said, sobbing. "Mistake? Well, the only thing I can do for you is give you his parents' address and some money for transport," he said. Ajanigo knelt down. "Thank you, sir." The uncle went into his room, returned with some money, and handed it to her. Ajanigo took it and left for the park, where she boarded a vehicle to the state where Desmond's parents lived. She reached there around 4 a.m. the next morning and waited at the park until the day brightened. Then she set out for the address the uncle had given her. When she finally arrived, a woman approached her. "Yes?" the woman questioned. "Good day, Ma," Ajanigo greeted. "Good day. Who are you?" the woman asked again. Ajanigo dropped the clothes she was carrying on her head. "My name is Ajanigo, Ma. I'm looking for Desmond," she responded. "From where?" the woman inquired. "From where he was staying with his uncle, Ma," Ajanigo replied. "Okay?" the woman asked again. Desmond and I are in a relationship, Ma, and I'm a few weeks pregnant for him," Ajanigo said, her voice trembling. "What?" the woman exclaimed. "God forbid. So because you heard he joined the army, you've suddenly shown up with pregnancy claims. Now, pick up that thing you just dropped and leave this place. How old are you that you're already opening your legs? Imagine this small brat," she thundered. Ajanigo was already wailing uncontrollably, unsure where to go if they chased her out. She was lost in thought when a man in his 60s walked into the compound. He bore a striking resemblance to Desmond. "What's happening here?" he queried. "My husband." This little girl walked into the compound, claiming that Desmond impregnated her, the woman said. "What? From where?" the man questioned. "From where he was staying with his uncle, sir. We were in a relationship before he left for this place," Ajanigo said, tears streaming down her face. "But Desmond joined the military a few weeks ago and won't be coming back anytime soon," the man said, looking at her. "I have nowhere else to go, sir. My parents chased me out and told me never to return," Ajanigo explained. "But how did you find your way here?" he asked. "His uncle gave me the address," she replied. "Well, you can't stay here. Take your things and get out of my house," the wife thundered. Your house? Did you bring any house with you when I married you? The man asked his wife. My child, are you sure Desmond is responsible for the pregnancy? He asked Ajanigo. Yes, sir, Ajanigo nodded. Pick up your things, he said, turning to his wife. Take her to the third room and let her stay there until Desmond returns, he ordered before turning back and going inside. Thank you, sir, Ajanigo said, relieved. You think you can just appear from nowhere with pregnancy claims? You will suffer, the woman threatened. Ajanigo ignored Desmond's mother's harsh words, carrying her load and following her to the room. You're lucky my husband arrived on time and found you here. You don't know what you're in for yet. How could Desmond impregnate you? I'm sure my son hasn't even seen a woman's underwear before, let alone slept with one. Don't worry, we shall see, she said harshly and left. Ajanigo didn't let her statements bother her much, at least she now had a place to stay. Later that night, Desmond's father, whom Ajanigo decided to call Baba, sent for her. She met him in the living room, where he was seated with his wife and two of Desmond's siblings, a boy and a girl. You've been in your room all day. Why didn't you come outside to get some fresh air? Baba asked. Nothing, sir, Ajanigo replied. Her eyes met Desmond's mother's, who eyed her so fiercely that she almost fell off the couch. What's your name? Baba asked. My name is Ajanigo, sir, she replied. Wow, I'll call you Nigo for short. You already know I'm Desmond's father. Beside me is his mother. Sitting over there is his younger brother, Shola, and his younger sister, Ofura. Please, make yourself comfortable and I welcome you once again. Even if my son isn't the one responsible for your pregnancy, if you had come to me for help, I would have still helped you because that's the kind of person I am. It's in my nature. But I'm very glad knowing that I'll soon be a grandfather, so I'll make sure to take very good care of you until Desmond returns, he assured. But how sure are you that Desmond is even the one responsible for this girl's pregnancy? Shola inquired. It's only a woman who can tell you who the father of her child or children is, Baba replied. Okay, I hear, Desmond's mother muttered. They all retired to their rooms that night. Ajanigo lay on her bed, praying to God to bring Desmond back safe and sound. She also decided to call Desmond's mother Mama because they were now her family. Months passed, and Ajanigo endured all sorts of maltreatment, especially from Mama and Shola. But Baba and Ofua treated her well. 6 months later, Ajanigo was heavily pregnant. One morning, while she was sweeping the floor, she noticed someone walking into the compound from afar. She took a second look, and to her surprise, it was Desmond. Overjoyed, she flung the broom aside and ran towards him. But just as she was about to hug him, he pushed her away and looked at her from head to toe. What are you doing here? Desmond questioned. The scene was tense as she was about to respond when a piercing scream erupted from behind. It was his mother, her voice filled with shock. Almost immediately, his siblings joined in, their eyes wide with alarm, but Desmond couldn't tear his gaze away from her. His expression was a mixture of disbelief and confusion, as if he were struggling to comprehend her presence. Mom, wait. What is she doing here, looking like this? Desmond questioned, his voice trembling slightly. My son, come inside and freshen up first. We'll discuss everything afterward, his mother replied gently, but Desmond was persistent. No, Mom, how did she get here? He asked again, his eyes never leaving her. His mother sighed deeply before explaining, well, she came here claiming that you impregnated her. For the past 6 months, she's been living with us. I told your father that the Desmond I know has never been intimate with any woman, but he didn't believe me. Her eyes widened in disbelief as she recounted the story. She stood there trembling, fear creeping up her spine as Baba, Desmond's father, called out from where he stood in front of the house. Desmond quickly went to greet his father, and after a brief conversation that she couldn't hear, Desmond followed him inside without another word. She felt a deep sense of disappointment. How could Desmond change so suddenly, despite everything they had shared? After all, he was the one who had taken her innocence. A few minutes later, she was summoned to the living room, where Baba, Desmond, his mother, and his siblings were gathered. Desmond, this lady came here months ago, claiming that you impregnated her. Is that true? Baba's voice was stern as he questioned his son. Desmond paused, his head hanging low. I only slept with her. I didn't know she would get pregnant, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Baba's tone softened, but his words were firm. Well, she is now your responsibility, even if you say you're not ready for marriage yet. A few weeks later, Desmond returned to his station, leaving her with only 200 naira. That afternoon, she was in the kitchen, exhausted from the day's chores. She knew that if she didn't prepare something before Mama returned from the market, she would be in for a barrage of harsh words. As she put the pot on the fire, Shola, Desmond's younger brother, walked into the kitchen. "Where's my food?" he demanded, his tone impatient. "Please, give me an hour to make it. It's not ready yet," she pleaded. Shola's face twisted in anger. "All you know how to do is spread your legs for men at your age. What have you been doing all day?" he thundered. Her patience snapped. "I won't have you talk to me like that. Be patient and let me make your meal, and if you can't wait, you can make it yourself," she retorted, her voice shaking with anger. Shola, enraged, slapped her. Instinctively, she slapped him back, and a fight broke out in the kitchen. Shola pushed her down, grabbed a piece of firewood, and began hitting her until she passed out. When she woke up, she was in the hospital, having been operated on. She had given birth to twin babies, a boy and a girl. A week later, she was discharged only to learn from Ophir, a family member, that Shola had been in police custody for the past week, released only the day before. Even Mama hadn't mentioned anything about it. "That's because Dad warned her not to bother you with anything anymore," Ophir explained. When her children were 10 months old, Baba called her into his room. He handed her Desmond's address and some transport fare, urging her to visit him. Since she had given birth, Desmond had only sent letters and hadn't bothered to visit his children. A few days later, she packed her bag, took her kids, and headed to Desmond's base. Upon arriving at the military barracks, an army officer escorted them to Desmond's flat. She was exhausted. Her only thought was to bathe the kids and herself, and then rest. But when she saw Lady's shoes by the door, she hesitated, unsure if it was really his flat. The officer knocked on the door, and when Desmond stepped outside, his face paled with shock. "Ajanigo," he exclaimed before quickly closing the door behind him. "What are you doing here? How did you get here?" he questioned, his tone sharp. "Is that how you welcome your kids and their mother into your home?" she asked, her voice trembling. Desmond reached into his pocket, counted out some Naira notes, and handed them to her. "Go back home. I'll visit by the end of the month," he said coldly. Tears welled up in her eyes. "Without even letting us in?" she asked, her voice cracking. A woman's voice echoed from inside the flat, and she appeared at the door. "Who is she?" the woman asked, turning to Desmond. "She's my sister from the village. I've already given her money to go back home," Desmond lied. She stood there, shocked and dumbfounded, as her children began to cry out of hunger. Desmond took the other woman by the hand, and they went back inside, leaving her outside. "How can someone just show up unannounced like this? Even if he's your brother, don't you know how to write a letter?" the girlfriend muttered as they disappeared behind the door. She refused to leave. Instead, she sat in front of the flat, breastfeeding her kids, tears streaming down her face. Despair overwhelmed her as she considered abandoning her children and running away. But thoughts of the future held her back. Would Desmond be able to care for them? Or should she just end her suffering altogether? An hour later, Desmond came out of the flat again, shocked to see them still there. "Are you still here? Please take them and go back home. I'll come visiting by month end," he said, his frustration evident. She stood up, her voice trembling with disbelief. "Are you this cruel? This is your first time seeing your twins, and you show no remorse." "I don't have time for this. By the time I return from work, you should be gone," he ordered before storming off. She looked at her sobbing children, then sat back down to breastfeed them. She considered using the money Desmond had given her to buy food, but she was too heartbroken to decide anything. As she sat there, a lady officer walked past them. She greeted the woman with her head down, not wanting her to see the tears in her eyes. The officer paused, looking at her closely, then turned back. "Madam, is everything okay?" the officer asked. "No, ma'am," she replied, her voice barely audible. "You can talk to me. These children are too young to be out in this scorching sun, and it's not healthy for you either." "What are you doing here? Are you here to see someone?" the officer pressed. Slowly, she began to explain everything. To her surprise, the officer's eyes filled with tears. She had never imagined a military woman could be so compassionate. The officer scooped up the children in her arms and asked her to come with them. Grateful and relieved, she picked up her bag and followed the officer to her flat. There, she and the children were bathed, fed, and made comfortable. For the first time in a long while, she felt a semblance of peace. The officer shared her own story, revealing that she had once been married, but was cast out when she couldn't conceive. She had joined the military and remained unmarried since then. Days passed, and they settled into the officer's flat. On the 5th day, they ran out of sugar, and she decided to go out and buy some. On her way back, she passed by Desmond's flat again. His girlfriend was sitting outside sipping juice and reading a magazine. She greeted the woman, but there was no response. She ignored it and continued on her way. But the girlfriend wasn't done. As she passed by again, the woman grabbed her shirt, dragging her back. She staggered, struggling to regain her balance. "If you like, be Desmond's wife or sister. All I know is that he's mine now," the girlfriend taunted. "Congratulations then. I pray he marries you," she replied, trying to walk away. But the woman wasn't finished. She dragged her back again and warned her to take another route, claiming that the path in front of their flat was for military officers only. "You can't decide for me where to walk and where not to walk," she responded angrily. The girlfriend slapped her and she immediately slapped back. A fight ensued. The girlfriend grabbed her glass of juice and smashed it against her head, causing blood to pour down her face. People rushed over, some holding the girlfriend back while others urged her to take her crying children inside. Despite the pain and blood, she wouldn't have stopped fighting if not for her kids. She gathered them in her blood-stained arms and started to leave when Desmond arrived. His girlfriend feigned tears, claiming that she had started the fight. Without hesitation, Desmond approached and began beating her, completely ignoring the fact that she was holding their children. Neighbors intervened, separating them and taking her back to the flat. One of them treated her wounds. Later that evening, the military woman returned and noticed her bandaged head. She asked how it happened, and after hearing the story, all she said was, "Okay." But a few minutes later, screams erupted from Desmond's flat. She ran outside to see what was happening. To her shock, she found the military woman standing in front of the flat, holding a horsewhip. Desmond and his girlfriend were sweating profusely, doing frog jumps while she whipped them relentlessly. No one dared to approach her, let alone beg her. Desmond's girlfriend was wailing, exhausted, but the fear of the whip kept her hopping. The woman was whipping them in turns, her anger palpable. Although I wanted to ask her to stop, I was too afraid to go near. "You both should kneel before Ajanigo and apologize, and never harass her again," the military woman ordered, her voice stern. "Desmond, you care less about her, so why are you and your girlfriend treating her as if she's not human? If you're no longer interested in her, then let her be. But I assure you, you will regret this someday. Now kneel before her and apologize." They both knelt hurriedly before Ajanigo, echoing in unison. "I'm sorry. I'm going inside now, but you both will hop 100 times more. No one leaves here. Keep hopping," she commanded. She then approached Ajanigo and gently picked up her children. "Let's go," she whispered. Ajanigo kept glancing back as they left, watching them still frog jumping on their own. Once inside the living room, Ajanigo knelt before the woman, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, Ma," she said, her voice trembling. "Get up, that's okay," the woman said, helping her to her feet. "Enough of all these formalities. You can call me Auntie Sade." Ajanigo smiled through her tears. "Okay, Ma," she replied. The following day, Auntie Sade gave Ajanigo some money to go to the market and buy foodstuffs. As she walked, Ajanigo decided to pass by Desmond's flat. Desmond's girlfriend was outside, spreading clothes. Ajanigo admired her strength from afar, considering the punishment she had endured the day before. But as soon as the girlfriend saw Ajanigo, she abandoned the clothes and rushed toward her, shredding Ajanigo's clothes. Ajanigo stood still, not uttering a word. "You think I'm afraid of that prostitute who took you in?" she hissed. "I purposely came out today to spread these clothes, waiting for you. By the time I finish with you, you'll run away from here," she threatened, continuing to tear Ajanigo's clothes. Desmond opened the door and stood there, stunned, his mouth agape. "What are you doing?" he asked, walking toward her. "Do you know that the lady who accommodated her is my superior at the office? Have you forgotten what she did to us yesterday? Please, I don't want my madam's trouble. Stop shredding her clothes this minute." His girlfriend ignored him and continued tearing at the clothes. Desmond tried to stop her, but she started fighting him. Eventually, Desmond beat her, went inside, and brought out her belongings. Ajanigo watched, curious to see the outcome. "Please leave here. I no longer want anything to do with you," Desmond thundered. She stood there wailing and insulting him, while Ajanigo shook her head and left. She went inside to change her clothes, and by the time she came back out, the girlfriend was gone. Ajanigo didn't bother telling Auntie Sade what had happened. 2 weeks later, Ajanigo told Auntie Sade that she needed to go back home. Though Auntie Sade tried to convince her to stay, Ajanigo was determined to return home and inform Desmond's father of everything that had transpired. Understanding this, Auntie Sade gave her a large sum of money and told her to feel free to visit any time. The next day, Auntie Sade took Ajanigo and her children to the park. A few hours into the journey, their vehicle was attacked by robbers. The driver maneuvered into the bush, and as soon as he parked, all the passengers ran into the bush, abandoning their bags, including Ajanigo and her twins. She carried them and ran as fast as she could into the depths of the forest, eventually stopping in the middle of nowhere. Her children began to cry, and in her confusion, Ajanigo started crying too. "Who's there? What are you doing here?" a voice called out. Terrified, Ajanigo fell to her knees. "Please have mercy on us," she begged. A man emerged from the bushes. No, get up please. I mean no harm. I'm only here to gather herbs. How did you get here?" he asked. Ajanigo explained everything, and the man kindly helped carry one of her twins and took them to his home. It was already 7 p.m. He gave them food, but as they were eating, Ajanigo overheard his wife expressing her concern. "Where exactly did you bring her from? You know the Oro festival, also known as the No Woman No Stranger festival, started 2 nights ago, and strangers are forbidden from visiting anyone's home during this period." "I don't want the anger of the gods," she lamented. "Keep quiet. Are you the one who's going to tell the chief priest that I brought a stranger home? We took the back road, and nobody saw us. Just keep that mouth of yours shut," he thundered. "I don't want any trouble," his wife muttered. Ajanigo didn't know whether to run or stay because she was well aware of the Oro festival. Fear gripped her, and she could no longer eat, but even if she decided to leave, where would she go? A few minutes later, the man showed her to a room where she could stay the night. About an hour later, the man's son came running into the compound, shouting, "Baba! Baba!" Ajanigo heard him from her room and grew more terrified. "What is it?" the man asked, his voice booming. "The Oro people are on their way here," the boy replied, panting. "Jesus," Ajanigo murmured under her breath. The man, his wife, and the rest of the family gathered outside the house, waiting for the Oro men. "Good evening to everyone," the Oro men greeted. Ajanigo could hear them from her room. She stood there, trembling, praying that her children would stay asleep. "We received information that you're harboring a stranger. How true is that?" one of the Oro men inquired. "No, we are not," the man replied swiftly. "Yes, we are. Please, I don't want to die. My husband brought home a woman with her 2 children this morning, and I warned him, but he wouldn't listen," his wife lamented. "Your husband is aware of the Oro festival, yet he went against the culture and tradition of the land," said one of the Oro men. "Bring the stranger out here. She and her children shall be used as a sacrifice for the cleansing of the land. And as for you, for bringing her home, you shall face the consequences," said another Oro man. The man's son opened the door to Ajanigo's room suddenly. "Please come out. We don't want any trouble. Just carry your children and come out," he ordered. Ajanigo was already crying, frightened beyond measure. She begged him to take her instead and spare her children, but he refused. She carried her sleeping twins and went outside to see the Oro men dressed in red with palm fronds tied to their arms. One of them held a long staff. "Young lady, we are currently observing our Oro festival, and according to the customs and traditions of our land, a stranger is not welcome during this period. Anyone who tries to harbor a stranger will be sent to the great beyond, and the stranger will be sacrificed to the gods for protection and cleansing," he said, his face stern. Ajanigo fell to her knees, begging them. She told them all she had been through, but they showed no remorse. "What you've been through is none of our business. You only stand a chance of liberation if you're an indigene of our land. If not, nothing can be done," he said coldly. "Bring her and her children along," another Oro man commanded. Ajanigo was wailing, her tears mixing with the dirt on her face. She needed a miracle. "I don't believe my blood and that of my children will be used as a sacrifice," she prayed silently. One of the Oro men helped her up, and she carried her now awake children in her arms. As they took her away, Ajanigo kept looking back, hoping the man and his wife would help. But after only a few steps, the Oro man with the staff pointed it at the man who had taken her in. Immediately there was a flash of lightning, and the man fell lifeless to the ground. Terrified, Ajanigo held her children tightly as they continued walking. They finally arrived at a shrine, and she was forced to kneel, her children in her arms. Ajanigo continued crying, her prayers silent but desperate. The native doctor approached with a calabash, attempting to touch her forehead, but a force flung him aside. "Where did you bring her from?" he thundered. "It's the stranger the herbalist brought home," one of the Oro men replied, his eyes wide with shock. "Take her away from here. She's not a stranger. She's an indigene," the native doctor shouted. As soon as she was forced out of town alongside her children and escorted to the outskirts, she found herself unable to comprehend the situation. How could a girl from Kogi State be considered an indigene of a town in the West? Was this somehow God's way of liberating her? The people who had escorted her turned back, and she hurried away, shivering with fear that they might change their minds and call her back. She doubled her pace, constantly thanking God as she walked through the lonely road in the dark. She walked a long distance and eventually arrived at another village. The first building she saw was a Catholic church. Fortunately, the entrance door was open, so she went inside with her children and headed straight to the altar, where she knelt and thanked God for the miracle. The next morning, around 6 a.m., people started arriving for morning mass. They were shocked to see her there, including the priest, as they had heard she had spent the night in the church. She looked haggard and dirty, and when she explained everything to them, they took pity on her. They gathered money to help her continue her journey. One of them took her to his home so she could freshen up with her children before she left for the park to proceed on her journey home. She arrived home safely later that evening, only to find a group of people gathered, looking mournful, including Desmond. She was stunned and dumbfounded. What happened? She wondered to herself. Ophir came running towards them and helped carry one of the twins. What's happening? She asked curiously. Daddy is dead, Ophir said amid tears. She was stunned and in great shock. Which daddy? She queried, but Ophir couldn't even answer. At that moment it felt as if the whole world had abandoned her. How could Baba have done this to her, leaving her all alone to decide her fate? She wailed and wailed, but her cries couldn't bring Baba back. She managed to walk through the crowd to her room, but the padlock had been changed. Auntie, wait, let me go to Mom to get the keys, Ophir said hastily, leaving to fetch them. She returned a few minutes later, scratching her head. Ophir, where is the key? She asked. Auntie, she stuttered. What is it? She asked again. Brother Desmond came home with his girlfriend yesterday, and Mom gave your room to her, Ophir revealed. What? She exclaimed. I knew it. Now that Baba is gone, my suffering has just begun. Where do I go from here now? She lamented. Auntie, let me go with you to the pastor's house. I'm sure he'll allow you to stay for a while, considering the fact that he was Daddy's friend, Ophir suggested. She was still wailing, already predicting how her future would unfold. As she was lost in thought, Desmond's girlfriend, whom Auntie Sade had dealt with before, walked in. She looked at her from head to toe and let out a slow laugh. You think that Desmond would no longer have anything to do with me, simply because you saw him throw out my things, right? Well, let me shock you. I'm not only going to be his wife. I'm a few weeks pregnant, my dear, she said, rubbing her tummy and grinning. I knew the moment I saw you that you weren't his sister. But you know what? If I don't marry him while you're still alive, I will marry him after your death, she threatened. Then you're never going to marry my brother, because Auntie Ajanigo here is not dying anytime soon. It's obvious you're the one who will soon die of heartbreak, because you don't know what will soon befall you. Ophir thundered back. Desmond's girlfriend approached, raising her hand to slap Ophir, but Ophir quickly grabbed her hand. Not on your life, husband snatcher. Don't worry, when it happens, I'll buy you a handkerchief to wipe those miserable tears of yours, Ophir retorted, then turned to Ajanigo. Let's go, she ordered. Ajanigo, still in shock, followed her like a dummy, unable to believe what had just transpired. They arrived at the pastor's house, and without hesitation, Ajanigo was accommodated. Baba was to be buried in 3 days. The following day, she returned to the house to help with the preparations. She approached the women, hoping to lend a hand, but a voice from behind interrupted her. Hey, what do you think you're doing? Get out of here. Don't even think about touching anything, just get out, Desmond thundered. Everyone started staring at her, and she became embarrassed. She left in a hurry, sobbing. The next day, she was summoned by the elders, along with Desmond, his girlfriend, and the rest of the family members. Good day, everyone, one of the elders greeted. He then turned to Ajanigo. My name is Uday. I am Desmond's father's younger brother. I am here to reveal all of my late brother's wishes on his deathbed. For those who might doubt my words, I had everything my late brother said recorded on my phone. Let's play it, he said, tapping his phone. Good day to you all. You are hearing my voice, so there's no need to doubt anything. Ajanigo, my daughter, I greet you. Though I didn't tell you, I visited your house some time ago with Uday, my brother, to see your family members so we could pay your bride price. But your mother chased us out, telling us to do whatever we wanted with you. On that note, Desmond, my son, you will take Ajanigo as your wife, and there is no going back. Any other woman you bring home for marriage shall not be accepted. Ajanigo is the first, and shall remain the only woman you will marry, which must be done before my burial. You must take her with you to your base. Failure to do this, you shall not partake in my burial rites until you marry her first. Take good care of yourselves, the voice note concluded. Everyone was stunned, turning and looking at each other. Desmond's girlfriend was already in tears. Ophir stood up, walked over to her and handed her a handkerchief. "As I said before, please take this to wipe your tears," Ophir said. The girlfriend paused, looked at Ophir from head to toe, and then continued crying. The only place Ajanigo had ever seen what Baba spoke through was at Auntie Said's place. She never knew it could be used to record someone's voice. Auntie Said would pick it up whenever it rang, speak through it, and the person on the other end would respond without seeing each other. "Hope these white people won't end up selling us one day without our consent," Ajanigo thought to herself. "So my people, the marriage rites will be carried out as soon as possible to enable Desmond to partake in the burial rites tomorrow," Uncle Ude announced. He then told Shola to gather some elders and the pastor as well. Desmond and Ajanigo were traditionally married, followed by a marriage blessing that same day. "I just hope I don't end up regretting all of this," Ajanigo thought to herself. After everything was done, Desmond was asked to give Ajanigo a hug, which he did while looking away. She didn't even bother to raise a hand for the hug, because giving him a hug wasn't her problem. Her major concern was how he would treat her and the kids when they returned to his base together. As much emphasis was placed on the fact that he must take them with him. She didn't want to consent to marrying him either, but with Baba gone, where else would she and the kids stay? She begged to stay at the pastor's house until they were ready to leave for Desmond's base, which everyone agreed to. Later that night, Ophir ran straight to the pastor's house and into Ajanigo's room. "Ophir, what is it? What happened?" Ajanigo asked in fear. "Auntie, come with me. There's something I want you to see," Ophir said, dragging her hand. Her children were asleep, so she asked the pastor's wife to watch over them, and she was happy to help. Ajanigo kept asking Ophir what was going on, but Ophir insisted that she just come first. They arrived home to find Desmond's girlfriend outside with her bags. Ajanigo turned to Ophir. "Is she leaving?" she asked. "Auntie, she said she saw Baba's ghost in her room, so she ran outside, screaming and weeping," Ophir said, laughing hard. "That's impossible," Ajanigo said, stunned. "So Mom helped her bring out her things and asked her to leave for now. She said she would send for her later," Ophir revealed. Desmond's girlfriend ended up leaving that night, and Ajanigo returned to the pastor's house. She lay in bed, pondering everything that had happened until she fell asleep. On the day of the burial, Ajanigo couldn't eat anything because her heart was too heavy. After the funeral service, she went into the kitchen to find something to eat, but found nothing. Some of the people who came for the burial had given cash gifts to her children, so she went to buy a few cups of rice to cook. She was in the kitchen making a fire when Mama stepped in. "Who's that? What are you doing there?" Mama questioned. "Mama, good day. It's me. The kids and I haven't eaten today, so I bought some raw rice and I'm about to cook it," Ajanigo answered. "You bought rice? From where? So you went and fetched my rice without telling me?" Mama queried. "No, Mama, it's not yours." "I bought it," Ajanigo cried out. "With what money? Look at this miserable thing. The man who used to pamper you like an egg is no more. Now it's my turn. You haven't seen anything yet." "Give me that rice and get out of here," Mama said, grabbing the bag of rice and leaving. Ajanigo immediately burst into tears. She carried her children and gently walked out of the kitchen, heading straight to the pastor's house. His wife was around, and Ajanigo begged her for some food to at least feed the kids. The pastor's wife arrived with 2 plates of rice and a bottle of soft drink, but Ajanigo was too heartbroken to eat. Desmond's mother had called her miserable. Was she? The woman didn't believe Ajanigo even had a penny. Why would she, when everything Ajanigo wore for the burial had been given to her by Ofura? Ajanigo kept thinking about everything, unable to believe that her own parents had chased her out to suffer like this. She stayed indoors for the rest of the day, unable to go out. Desmond was on leave, so he stayed home for about 3 more weeks after the burial. Finally, he came to see them at the pastor's house for the first time. He was there to inform them that they would be leaving for his base the next day. After he left, Ajanigo went to the pastor and told him she wasn't comfortable with the idea, but he assured her that she would be fine. The next day, they were set to leave. Ofura came to Ajanigo and hugged her tightly. "You're the best sister-in-law ever," she whispered. Ajanigo looked at her with teary eyes. "You're just like Baba. May you be happy all your life, Ofura," she prayed. They finally left for the park in a tricycle. Ofura and Ajanigo kept waving at each other until they both disappeared from sight. They arrived at the park and boarded a bus. Desmond didn't even help carry any of the children until they arrived at their destination. A total stranger offered to help, but Ajanigo told him not to bother. Her children were her source of joy and happiness. She never got tired of carrying them. When they arrived home, Desmond brought out the key to his house. and was about to insert it in the keyhole when the door opened. Lo and behold, it was his girlfriend. Thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed the story so far, please drop a comment below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell notification so you won't miss any updates. Thank you, and remember, we love you.